All right, then let's get started, I suggest. Welcome everyone to this webinar on the Open Innovation in Science Award of the Einstein Center for Neurosciences in Berlin. In this webinar, you will be provided with information on the submission and the selection process involved in this specific award that is given to neuroscientists and life scientists who can convincingly demonstrate how they use open and collaborative practices to increase the productivity and the impact of their scientific research in a new or ongoing research project that they're currently working on. Throughout this webinar, you're going to have the option to ask questions and provide us with comments using the chat function. We will have enough time at the end of the webinar to debrief these questions. My name is Marion Poetz. I'm a professor at Copenhagen Business School at the Department of Strategy and Innovation, and I'm also the scientific director of the LBG Open Innovation Science Center. My own research very much revolves around the topics of open innovation science. So in my work, I'm studying processes, effects, and boundary conditions of open and collaborative knowledge production in science and innovation. Together with Benedikt Salmen and Oliver May, who are the coordinators at the Einstein Center for Neurosciences, we have developed and initiated an open innovation science program, an entire open innovation science initiative, and the Open Innovation Science Award is one of its components. We have launched it in 2018, and for the first time have awarded neuroscientists and life scientists with the Open Innovation Science Award in 2019. Benedikt, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about why you have initiated this Open Innovation Science Award?
Yeah, sure, and with pleasure even. Just briefly as a reminder, questions, please send them to me in the chat function. And now back to the question from Marion. So I think it's not a secret that doing research now is becoming increasingly more difficult and complex, and it demands a very complex set of skills and competencies from each individual researcher and from each individual team. And we do strongly believe that the open innovation in science offers a toolkit and helps develop a mindset that can help scientists to become more and more efficient and relevant in their research. And since this is sometimes particularly hard to implement at the beginning of a career or at the beginning of your journey into open innovation in science, supportive structures like our training program and catalytic structures like this award could be extremely helpful to empower individual scientists to start using the OES methodology and framework of concept. And generally, we are not alone in this belief. Openness and collaboration are increasingly more associated with breakthroughs in scientific and in the practice of scientific knowledge. And they might thus offer a remedy for the declining scientific productivity and for addressing the grand and very complex challenges of our time. We just have to think about climate change, for example, which even touches in the realm of neurosciences on more than one subdiscipline. And a related example of this general new trend in science is, of course, also the open science movement, which has sparked a revolution to make scientific knowledge more widely available. And the concept of open innovation in science is complementary, but very importantly, it is more broadly, and it integrates and encompasses inter- and transdisciplinary knowledge flows in collaboration. And this goes along the entire process of generating and translating scientific research. At the ECN, we recognize the importance of applying open and collaborative practices for the progression of scientific research and its translation into scientifically relevant solutions. As part of our lab for open innovation in science and with this OES award, we want thus to empower researchers on the neuro and also life sciences to learn about and experiment with open and collaborative research practices. Since innovative inter- and transdisciplinary research projects in their early stages often face problems receiving financial support from established funding lines, Our OES award will grant neuroscientific and life science researchers and research projects that convincingly have demonstrated why and how they will apply open innovation approaches in one or more stages of the research process with the annual ECN Open Innovation in Science Award. So this will be essentially financial, but also logistically and other forms of help that we can offer to promising projects which will not have a classical funding line to attend to. So Marian, would you please share what kind of project submissions we are looking for in this award?
Of course, Benedikt. I think you already nicely summarized that this is about empowering and helping scientists, particularly neuroscientists and life scientists in the Berlin area, to learn about this and to help them start research projects that incorporate open and collaborative practices. And regarding your question, what kind of projects we look at, allow me to go a little bit back to what you also mentioned in your introduction and the motivation why you engage in open innovation science. What is open innovation science? There is a separate webinar that we held yesterday, and you can watch the webinar video via the ECN website. But just to quickly wrap up, when we talk about open innovation science, we talk about applying open and collaborative research practices, so inter and transdisciplinary knowledge flows and collaborations, such as, for example, crowd science approaches, novel forms of industry, academia, co-creating, open data reuse, living labs, and similar approaches along the entire scientific research process. So from conceptualizing a new research project, setting up research questions and hypotheses, and developing methods and materials, to collecting data, analyzing data, processing data, interpreting the findings, to writing up a research project, and eventually diffusing your research and translating it into innovation. And all this using open and collaborative practices, not as an ends, but as a means to increase the productivity and the impact of scientific research. And this is exactly what we are looking for with respect to submissions to the Open Innovation Science Award at the Einstein Center for Neurosciences. So we look for open innovation science project ideas. So this is ideas where researchers or research teams convincingly outline how they use open and collaborative practices in one or more stages of their research process, in either a planned or an ongoing neuroscientific or life science research project, to increase the novelty or the efficiency or the impact of this specific research. And of course, we're well aware that different disciplines have different kinds of research processes. And what you can see on this slide here is just a very typical research process where you start with a research question. You may develop methods to collect data, you analyze data, you write up a paper, and you ideally diffuse and translate your research findings. But in other research areas or in different research areas, of course, this process may look slightly differently. But in a sense, what we look for is how well researchers or research teams can show how they use open and collaborative practices in one or more stages of this process to really help them improve the productivity and or the impact of their research projects. And as Benedikt already said initially, the Einstein Center for Neurosciences, with its Einstein Center for Neuroscience Award, Open Innovation in Science Award, supports the development and implementation of these project ideas related to productively incorporating open and collaborative practices into neuroscientific and life science research. Let me give you a couple of examples to make that a bit more tangible. What you can see here is a picture of all the finalists of last year's Open Innovation in Science Award ceremony. That was in October 2022. And those two young researchers were among the winners of the 2022 Open Innovation in Science Award of the Einstein Center for Neurosciences. And the project idea that they submitted and that was selected as one of the two winning projects was embedded in research on digital psychiatry. So those two researchers are part of a research team at the Department of Psychiatry and Neurosciences at Charité. And they are very much interested in their research in whether, and if so, how digital interventions can help address people with bipolar disorders. And in this particular research project, they were very much aware of some of the challenges involved in doing this kind of research. For example, if you want to understand what are patients' actual needs, what are digital preferences of patients who are affected by bipolar disorder. This is very specific because this is a disease that is still highly stigmatized, and this is issues where you have to deal with complex and sensitive and stigmatized topics. So the best way to make sure that you collect high quality data is by incorporating or co-developing the data collection instruments together with the patients and with peer specialists, which is exactly one of the elements of this Open Innovation Science project idea that was submitted and that actually was winning one of the Open Innovation Science Awards. Another aspect of their project idea is that when you collect that kind of data, it's really important that you truly understand what these unmet needs and digital preferences of people suffering from bipolar disorder actually are. And in order to avoid biases, they have also decided to involve patients and peer specialists in the analysis of that data. So co-analyzing the data and using the results of this data analysis process to also co-develop a digital therapy tool together with patients, with peer specialists, and other kinds of stakeholders such as software and app developers. All that for the purpose of, on the one hand side, collecting high quality data, making sure that the data analysis is not biased, given the specific sensitive and stigmatized context that we're working on, and then also to co-develop a digital therapy tool, a digital therapy intervention, together with relevant stakeholder groups in order to make sure to increase the translatability of the outcome of this process. So when we look into this, the research team behind this project idea productively used open and collaborative methods, in this case, co-creation approaches with patients and peer specialists and other relevant stakeholder groups in the stage of developing data collection methods and materials, in the stage of processing and analyzing that data, and in the stage of diffusion and translation of this data. This project has been developed last year. It's not yet a finished project, but the project team is very actively working on implementing their project idea into their research on digital psychiatry. Another example that I wanted to share with you is the second winner of last year's Open Innovation Science Award. She's a researcher. She joined us digitally for the award ceremony. She's a researcher who does MRI research, who studies the effect of early life stress, meaning to which extent does stress experienced by the baby during the pregnancy of the mother influence brain development. And in her particular case, the challenge that she faces in her research is that the process of doing the brain segmentation when looking into the brain scans in the imaging data takes a lot of time and needs to be very accurate. So her goal was to use a crowd science approach to increase the speed and the accuracy of the quality control process for the brain segmentation. She co-designed a crowd science interface and related training material that is then used in a large-scale crowdsourcing platform, Suniverse, where the brain segmentation, the quality control for the brain segmentation is then outsourced to many members of a crowd who eventually can help to significantly speed up the quality control process, but also increase the accuracy of the crowd of the quality control process. So the idea here is basically what would take an individual researcher many, many months to complete is then turned into a crowd science project where many people help with this process in order to speed it up and to increase its accuracy. And last but not least, an example from our very first Open Innovation Science Award at the Einstein Center for Neurosciences in Berlin. The award winners back then were researchers working on schizophrenia. And their particular research challenge, or the challenge they particularly faced in their research, was that if you want to have high quality imaging data from patients suffering from schizophrenia, this is a critical issue because usually these patients face issues of claustrophobia, for example, or very sensitive to noise and other issues that compromise the quality of the fMRI scans. So here the two researchers decided, well, how about if we involve different kinds of stakeholders, including the patients, TAs, medical engineers, to co-develop solutions for how we could improve the quality of these fMRI scans and also its comparability. And a nice side effect of that is that this potentially could also reduce the duration of fMRI experiments conducted with schizophrenia patients. So a couple of examples from past successful Open Innovation in Science project ideas that we look for as part of the Open Innovation Science Award. Let me conclude answering Benedict's questions on how the submission process looks like and what we are looking for. Who can participate in this award? For this specific award, the target group are all individual scientists or group of scientists in the fields of neuroscience or life sciences who are located at research institutions in Berlin, including, of course, all the founding and partner institutions of the Einstein Center for Neurosciences. And in this particular award, we want to specifically encourage early career researchers, postdocs, but also PhD students, either individually or together with their supervisors, to apply, to submit, or to participate in this Open Innovation Science Award. Benedict, back to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for giving these examples. I think you do have, I think now people have a lot on after this examples that you've given, people have now an idea or a spark of an idea what they could submit. Could you elaborate on the submission process a bit more in detail and how they can actually get into this award procedure? Because I think this is the next logical question for everybody who has been triggered by this or inspired by the nice examples you gave.
Of course, I'll share my slides again. Yes. Sure. So how can you participate in the ECN Open Innovation Science Award? It's basically a three-step process. First of all, anyone interested in participating in this award submits a short project description of their Open Innovation Science idea. So this is a 6-page description based on a template that is provided on the ECN website. The second step is that all submissions will be reviewed by a panel of experts in open innovation science, neurosciences, and life sciences. And the best submissions are then selected for further competing in the Open Innovation Science Award, and all submissions are going to receive feedback. And the third step is the Open Innovation Science Award event. You can here see a picture of the award event with all the finalists from 2019. At this award event, the most promising Open Innovation Science project ideas will be presented, and the winners will be nominated and awarded with the Open Innovation Science Award prize. And as a next step, all the finalists will also get further support in the context of project development workshops. I'll get into all these stages in more detail in a second. But one important thing that is also provided, and I think that is very unique, and I think a real asset that the Einstein Center for Neuroscience is providing, is that everyone who is interested in submitting to the award can receive individual project idea coaching prior to the submission. So anyone who is interested in getting help with developing their open innovation science project ideas can get an individual coaching session. I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more in detail later. For those who already participate in the Lab for Open Innovation Science, that is a specific training program for junior scientists. For those, this individual coaching is integrated into their training program. And for anyone else, for all those who are not participating in the ECN Lab for Open Innovation Science, they can also sign up for an individual coaching session to get help developing their open innovation science project idea. As I said, I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more in detail later. But let's look into the different stages more in detail. So this is basically the most important things you need to know when you consider preparing a submission for the ECN Open Innovation Science Award. As I mentioned before, it's a short idea description that you have to submit. It's 6 pages. You're going to have a template for this. This template is available at the ECN website, available for download at the ECN website. And you then have to submit your completed idea description by the submission deadline to ecn-office@charité.de. The submission deadline is usually in the beginning of July. For the 2023 Open Innovation Science Award, the submission deadline is July 7, 2023. Yeah? And the main elements that you need to cover in your project description, which is also the way the template is structured, is that you need to give us a little bit information about the context that your open innovation science project idea is embedded. So what is either a new or an ongoing neuroscientific or life science research project or program that you work on and where this open innovation in science project idea is embedded? That's the first part. So then we understand the context. Then the next part in your submission covers your project goals. So what is it that you want to achieve with your open innovation science approach? What is or what are the research challenges in the process of generating or translating this neuroscientific or life science research project that you have described before? For example, like in the cases we've seen before, is it a question of developing appropriate data collection instruments in order to get high quality data? Or is it a question of efficiently collecting data, speeding up the data collection process? Do you face the challenge that you need to have more relevant research questions that are more directly related to societal issues or needs? Or is it something that where you need to ensure already in the setup of your research project that you increase the likelihood of translating your scientific discoveries into innovation? So there are multiple challenges that everyone faces in their research, and you need to lay out what is the challenge that you think can be addressed by applying open and collaborative research practices. The next part is then to describe your open innovation science approach. So what kind of knowledge do you source in order to address that challenge? With whom externally do you plan to collaborate or exchange knowledge with in order to address the challenges that you have described before? Under which terms do you plan to collaborate or exchange knowledge with whoever from the outside world? And when I talk about the outside world, that could be, of course, researchers from different disciplines, but very likely also actors outside academia. That could be crowds or citizens or patients or companies or policymakers and other external stakeholder groups. And last but not least, you need to then also give us your insight or your take on the Open Innovation Science project value. So how does this Open Science project idea that you have described before contribute to improving the productivity and or the impact of your research as compared to doing it in the traditional way? So those are the main elements that you need to think about and submit as part of your Open Innovation Science project idea description. You find all this information, by the way, of course, also on the ECN website. In the next step then, so when we have received all the submissions, and again in 2023, the submission deadline is July 7, 2023. In the next step then, a panel of Open Innovation Science experts will review all the submissions. Will then also provide feedback on all the submissions. So all submissions will receive a feedback letter, and will select those project ideas that they consider to be most promising. Yeah? And those project ideas are also then those who will be invited to do a presentation at the Open Innovation Science Award event, which usually takes place in October as part of the Berlin Neuroscience meeting. In 2023, the award event is scheduled for October 6. And all participants, all those who submitted proposals to the Open Innovation Science Award, will receive their feedback by the beginning of September. In 2023, they will receive feedback by September 4, 2023. So that's the second step. And in the third step of the Open Innovation Science Award, all those who have been invited as finalists to present their project ideas at the award event in October will then prepare a pitch in science project idea, will present that at the award event, and a panel of Open Innovation Science experts is present. They will live evaluate the pitches and will then nominate the award winners. And so far, we have always given away the main award and the runner-up award, so always 2 awards, but depending on the quality of the presentations, it might be only 1, it may also be more than 2 awards. The winners receive financial support amounting to 15,000 euros, as well as customized project coaching. So they participate in project development workshops, and they will also receive individual coaching for planning the next steps with respect to implementing their ideas. And the winners have to hand in an elaborate version of the project proposal by February to, again, ecn-office@charité.de. Not only the winners, but also all the finalists are invited to participate in these project development workshops. They are customized, so subject to the kind of projects that are among the finalists. We will organize 1 or more project development workshops where experts in the particular field related to the particular types of open innovation approaches that the finalist projects use. We will invite experts who help the winners and the finalists and their teams to further materialize and implement their Open Innovation Science project ideas. Benedikt, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Marion. So I think people are now quite eager to find out what actually makes a winning project. And since you're the chair of a panel of experts in open innovation in science, that is, of course, which are nominating the winner, evaluating the proposals, and doing all these work which makes this award run, you're, of course, in an excellent position to answer that. So could you please tell us what the panel looks at when selecting the finalists and the winning projects?
Sure. So first of all, you need to do all these steps that I have just outlined. Yeah. But when we review all the submissions in the first stage, and then also while we are listening to the pitch presentations at the award event, we particularly look into a couple of aspects that determine whether a project qualifies as a finalist, respectively later as a winning project. And one of the first aspects we look into, and that goes back to the idea that open and collaborative practices are means to improve the productivity and impact of scientific research and not an end in itself. So it's not about being open or collaborative for the sake of openness and collaboration, but for the sake of addressing relevant research challenges in such a way that you can improve the productivity and impact of your research. So the first thing we look at is how well does a proposal, an idea description, outline one or more research challenges they are facing in the process of generating or translating their neuroscientific or life science research that they describe in their project submission. Yeah. Is this an issue about data quality? Is it an issue about speed, about accuracy? Is it an issue about making sure that your research findings get translated? Is it an issue about asking the right research questions that are both novel and relevant? And this is the first part that we look at, how well the proposal is outlining one or more of these challenges. The second set of criteria that we look into is how well does the proposal describe an open innovation science approach? So a way of productively using open and collaborative practices for addressing the research challenge or the research challenges that have been described in the first part of the submission. And here we, of course, look into the novelty of this approach. So is this something that we have seen 1,000 times, or is this something that is novel? We particularly, and even more importantly, look into how useful is this approach to address the research challenges that you have outlined. So how good is the fit between what kind of problems you're facing in your research and the extent to which the kind of open and collaborative practice you outline can help you address these challenges. And finally, of course, we also look into whether the approach you outline is feasible to implement within the specific research project or program and in the specific research context that you're in. Finally, with respect to the initial proposal submissions, we also, like more generally, evaluate how much does the specific neuroscientific or life scientific research project overall benefit from using the open innovation science approach that was outlined in the idea description. And both in the initial submission and then also with respect to the pitch presentations of the finalist projects at the award event, we also look at the quality of the presentation. And all other things being equal, if two projects that are have equally well described their research challenges, their approach, and where we say that they equally benefit from using this approach, then of course, a very good presentation may be more likely to receive the award than a less good presentation. So the quality of the presentation is something that we look into, particularly when all other things are being equal. So those are the most important things that we look at when evaluating submissions and then also selecting the winning projects at the award event. Benedikt.
Okay, what I can also say from our part of the Einstein Center is to get more into the awarding rewards, so to speak. So we will give direct financial support to the winning project, so to help them further materialize and implement their OES project ideas. This is quite often really important because traditional funding lines are often lacking these supportive structures. And of course, we don't stop there. We do not just give money, but also we give the award winners individual support in planning the next step. This is quite often logistical support when it comes to getting rooms, devices, access to devices, networking with experts, which may be needed for upcoming steps, etc., etc. And of course, for many junior researchers, it's the first money they ever have. So administrating the money is not that easy when you have never done it. So all these things we help. We also do offer a lot of support for the finalists of this kind if they are able to continue implementing their OES project without supporting money. And definitely all the finalists, which means all those who were invited to pitch, they get a series of workshops for developing the project before the pitch. So they can really sharpen their OES ideas, foster the tools, and address critical implementation issues to make their proposal as perfect or as good as possible. And we do think the individual coaching sessions in preparation of the submission and all the feedback that the participants receive is a great learning opportunity in itself to improve researcher skills in applying open and collaborative practices to science with respect to this award, but of course in general to present their ideas and their research in general in a really professional manner. So I think there will be a multitude of benefits from just this step alone. So for those who participate in our training structures, the Lab of Open Innovation and Science, the only the OS award is an interrogative element. It is also the element where all the things which have been learned will be really executed and become alive for this particular set of students. I talked now a lot about this project development support and everything we do for the participants to really have a good project to go into the final battle, to pitch it. Could you explain this a bit more in detail, Marion, because this is, of course, critical to succeed.
Of course, happy to do so. Let me just allow me to pick up one of the points that you made in just before. I think all the things that you learn and practice when you participate in this Open Innovation Science Award are increasingly getting relevant skills also outside this specific award, because more and more funding organizations and also journals require that you demonstrate skills and apply open and collaborative practices to your research. So I think it's a good trial run in a sense for many other things that researchers are going to increasingly face in the future. But answering your question, Benedikt, I have summarized the different project development support that we provide as part of the Open Innovation Science Award. As you said, Benedikt, there is certain support mechanisms that are only available to scientists who participate in the Lab for Open Innovation Science, the ECN LOIS. As part of this LOIS program, the participants get training modules, various training modules on Open Innovation Science basics and Open Innovation Science tools. That is, for example, data or material sharing and reuse, that is crowd and citizen science, that is patient engagement, or that is new forms of academia industry co-creation. All those who participate in the LOIS also have an Open Innovation Science idea workshop that is integrated into their program and that helps them get started with thinking about and developing open innovation science ideas they can incorporate in their own neuroscientific or life science research. And then there's a couple of things that are available to all who participate in the Open Innovation Science Award. So that is everyone doing research in the fields of neuroscience and life sciences located at institutions in Berlin, at research institutions in Berlin. So everyone who is interested in developing an open innovation science project idea and submitting that idea to the Open Innovation Science Award can have an individual open innovation science idea coaching. That coaching works in a way that everyone can get a 1 hour individual 1 hour coaching session that can be with individual researchers, but also with research teams. That is an online coaching session that everyone who is interested in that prior to submitting to the award can schedule by sending an email to me, mp.si@cbs.dk. For the 2023 award, the coaching sessions can be scheduled in the period between May 15 and June 30. So within the period of 1.5 months, you can individually schedule an online coaching session where you receive feedback and where you can discuss additional questions related to your open innovation science project idea. As a requirement to participate in such an individual coaching appointment, you need to submit a short abstract, max 250 words, to me via email, as part of which you outline what kind of open innovation science approach you want to incorporate into what kind of research project that you're planning or working on, and how do you think you benefit from applying this open innovation science approach. So again, summarizing, everyone who is interested in submitting, even if you don't participate in any of the ECN's specific open innovation training programs, can schedule an individual 1 hour coaching session to receive feedback on your initial idea and to ask further questions in order to develop a submission for the Open Innovation in Science Award. As already mentioned, usually the submission deadline for the award is beginning of July. This year it is July 7, and the coachings, the individual coaching sessions, online coaching sessions via Zoom can be scheduled in the period between mid-May and end of June. Then moving on, as I mentioned before, all submissions will get feedback on their submission, informing them whether their project was considered to be among the finalists or not, and receiving feedback on issues they can consider to improve their project ideas. And then all the finalists are invited to present their ideas at the award event. Again, usually that is happening in October. In 2023, the award event is scheduled for October 6th as part of the Berlin Neuroscience meeting. And you will also be receiving feedback on your presentation as part of the award event. And all the finalists then will be invited to participate in project development workshops. That's part of the non-monetary prize that you receive by participating in the ECN Open Innovation Science Award. Subject to the types and how similar the different finalist projects are, we either organize one workshop where everyone participates, or a series of workshops for specific types of projects where experts in the specific fields will be invited to help you further develop your project ideas, address critical issues for implementation, and discuss what are important next steps. For the winning projects, they will additionally receive an individual coaching session where we discuss how to best spend the award, the prize money, and what the most critical next steps in the implementation process are. So there is an entire package of support, and I think that's really great that the ECN is enabling that, and that again speaks to this idea that the Einstein Center for Neurosciences really wants to empower their researchers to learn how to master these practices in future research projects, in future research applications. Benedikt, back to you. Benedikt, you're muted. Benedict needs to be unmuted.
Yeah, he is unmuted now. So
I'm back. So sorry, there was a technical glitch. I was blocked from unmuting somehow. But it's not so bad. I had some time to at least start selecting and grouping the questions we have received so far. Yeah, we are 45 minutes in. It's time for our Q&A session. And I encourage everybody who has still questions to send them to us by chat. In a few minutes, I will then, or a few seconds, I will start asking the first questions. I kind of grouped them into a few questions I have put together when they were very closely related. So if you don't find your question word by word, this is the reason for that. And in case, yeah, you find I did make a mistake or fell a bit short when I did this, you just use the chat function to reiterate your question if I misunderstood, or write us later an email in case you find an answer not satisfactory or not fully giving you what you wanted after a good night's sleep. So we will answer it then later. But let's start with a more general question. So when you're not, when you're intrigued to prepare and compete in this award, but haven't received any formal education or training yet in open innovation in science, here is one: where can I get more information about open innovation in science? Of course, this is very important and very basic.
I think there's quite a lot of information already on your website, on the ECN website. And there are also links to further readings on open innovation science on the website. What is always also possible is, if you're interested in this, anyone is warmly welcome to email me, and I'm happy to share more material. But then, of course, there's also the possibility to participate in the Lab for Open Innovation Science that Benedict and Oliver are organizing on an annual basis. And there's various smaller workshops that are also organized once in a while, for example, for PIs or other groups at the Einstein Center for Neurosciences. Anything that I forgot, Benedict?
No, I don't know right now, which comes to my mind. And yeah, if something new pops up, a new resource or something like that, we would link it on our homepage anyhow, as soon as we get knowledge of that. Okay, a related question, but more into the details, into the mechanics, if you want, of the award submission and evaluation procedure. So you mentioned that there is a coaching for researchers who want to submit to the award. And I myself don't know yet much about open innovation in science. So related to the first question, how should I prepare for this coaching, and do I need to pay for it? Yeah, this is, of course, a point for particularly junior researchers who don't have their own money for these kind of things.
Good question. I think the good thing is that participating in this coaching session is free to anyone who aims at submitting to the Open Innovation Science Award. Free for you. Of course, the ECN provides the funding for this. And how can you prepare for this? Two things. There is a webinar on what is open innovation science that is available, where the webinar video is available on the ECN website. And I think this could already give you some inspiration as to how you, in your particular research project or in your particular research program, how you could benefit from using open and collaborative practices. And there's also, as I mentioned, there's all kinds of reading materials that are available on the ECN website, and anyone can also reach out to me for further readings. And what you need to do is you need to take this, your first ideas, take this inspiration to translate it into a first idea. And that first idea, you need to put it into a short abstract, max 250 words. You email that to me, and on the basis of this, we can schedule an individual coaching session with you or with your research team.
Okay, thanks for this answer. So another important detail on the mechanics of the submission, yeah, reflecting the high degree of competitiveness in modern science, of course. If I describe an idea for how I would like to use OES in a new research project, for example, in a project I prepare for submitting to the DFG, so the German Research Council, is my idea then kept confidential?
We have to look into your idea in order to review it, of course. So the panel of experts who is engaged in the review process is definitely reading your idea. And if you don't want that idea to be shared with anyone else or information from that idea, please just include this is confidential in your idea submission, and it will not be it will be kept confidential among the experts who evaluate your proposal. Of course, as part of the if you are selected to be an award finalist, you have to be able to talk about that idea at the award event. But there you decide how much you share with respect to the underlying research.
Okay, thanks for that. Then here's a question to the 6-page volume of the submission you mentioned somewhere in the first third of your talk. Can I add appendices to my submission, e.g. a research paper, computer code, or additional material for better understanding and explaining my OES idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the main answer to this is whatever you want to convey in order to convince us that your idea is the one that should be a finalist idea needs to be in the main body of that submission. So on these 6 pages, this is where the most important information needs to be. And usually appendices are not necessary. But if there is a good reason for why, for example, a large chart where you outline a specific challenge or a specific way of collecting data in your research field, if there is a good reason for adding an appendix that supports an argument that you make in the main body, you're welcome to add it as an appendix to your submission. But again, the submission, the appendix should not be where we find information on why your project idea is the one that should be winning this award. It should be in the main body of the submission.
Okay, very important information, of course. So one is able to see the forest despite all the trees in front of it. Another important question here, particularly regarding the relationship between open access, open data, and our award. Can I submit to this award if I want to get funding for publishing my work open access?
Yeah, that's a good question. Theoretically, yes. Practically, open access publishing is a unidirectional way of sharing research outcomes with the public or with all actors in an interested society. It's a very established concept already, a very established concept of applying openness in scientific research, and it's not very novel. And it's also something where you as a researcher only indirectly benefit from. Of course, it may increase the citations to your paper, but you can submit it, but the likelihood that this is considered to be an outstandingly novel, useful, and feasible idea is low compared to the other types of submissions we likely get to this award.
Okay, thanks. Then a couple of important details here about what you can do or cannot do for the award. Can I participate with an already existing or ongoing project, or does it have to be a completely new project which I'm submitting?
No, it can be both. It can be that you say, we're currently working on this research project and as part of doing this research, we face a particular challenge, and we think we can address it with an open innovation science approach. Yeah, to say, well, we have a super interesting discovery. We developed a new algorithm. We developed a new therapy tool, and now we think that we could use open innovation science methods to find potential applications for that. Or we have come into an issue of data quality in our research project, in our ongoing research project, and we think that an open innovation science approach could help us improve the data quality. But you can also, of course, submit a new research project. You could say, well, in my PhD research, or in a future research project, or in a research proposal that I want to develop for DFG or for the Horizon Europe program, I'm planning to investigate the relationship between A and B. And in order to do that, I would like to incorporate open innovation science projects, open innovation science approaches into my research for the sake of improving this or that aspect of a planned research project. So yes, short answer, you can submit project ideas that relate to new projects, but also to ongoing projects.
So here's a person who thinks he or she has the idea already, which could lead to the development of a startup, and therefore asks if a startup idea would be accepted and can participate in the award.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also a good question. I think we have to distinguish here between, so this is not an award for academic entrepreneurship. Yeah, there are all kinds of other programs that help scientists who want to commercialize their research. But yeah, if you say, well, I have this interesting discovery, I have developed a new approach, a new method, I have found a new compound, whatever it is, yeah, and you say, I really need to find a way of translating my scientific discoveries into a clinical research study, or into a product or service innovation, into a new therapy tool, into a new drug, whatever it is. And you think that an open approach to finding a way of translating your science into innovation works best, then yes, then you can submit how you would use open and collaborative practices in order to translate your science into innovation. But if you have already, if you do already have a startup, or want to have decided that you want to become an academic entrepreneur, without engaging in open and collaborative approaches, there are other support programs that will be better suited for the kind of support you need.
Okay. Final question, which was addressed, but very briefly only in the talk. So does the project I'm submitting have to be in neurosciences, or in the field of neurosciences?
It has to be, I mean, of course, there is, you can apply open and collaborative practice to science in all kinds of disciplines. And if you visit the webinar that we had on what is open innovation science, you will also see examples from all kinds of other disciplines. But for this specific award, it's hosted by the Einstein Center for Neurosciences. In that sense, it addresses proposals from the fields of neurosciences and related fields in the life sciences, for example. So there is a focus on the neurosciences and the life sciences for this particular award.
Okay, a related question, a bit more specific. So I'm a philosopher with an interest also in cognitive sciences. I have a rough idea of a project. Can I formally participate?
Of course you can, yeah. If it is somehow related to neuroscientific or life science topics, we look forward to receiving your submission.
Okay, can I participate with my PhD project if it implements OES principles?
Of course, and we, as I said before, we specifically encourage junior scientists or early career scientists to participate in this award, because as Benedikt, as you said before, it's very often the juniors who don't have enough funding to get started with something new, but not exclusively. So yes, you can participate with a PhD project, but we also encourage you to think about jointly participating, for example, with your supervisors. We had a number of submissions last year where PhD students jointly participated in this award together with their supervisors.
Okay, so what is the feedback looking like that I received by the end of the evaluation? So how detailed is it? Was it just accepted, rejected, I suppose this means?
It's going to be an accepted, rejected, but you will also receive comments on how you could improve your research idea, your open innovation in science project idea in your research. And particularly the finalist projects will receive elaborated feedback on what they can do to improve their ideas for the award presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I may add just to this particular point from as a representative of the Einstein Center. Of course, there can be only one winner or maybe a follow-up project, but we had a lot of really promising projects last year, and we do encourage people sometimes when we have the feeling there's just a little bit of more work missing or experience from the side of the junior researcher to resubmit an overworked proposal a year later. And we will do this also for this round, because we think there were 2-3 ideas which were really close of being particularly implementable, but needed a little bit of more thought and work and maybe a more experienced team to work on it. But in essence, they were very, very good. So we want to give good feedback, and we encourage people to let this feedback grow and maybe reapply a year later.
Excellent.
So
Benedikt, we already arrived at the end. Is there any final question, or should we
there is
close?
just one final question, but I can answer it very, very short.
Yes.
Shortly, what happens after submitting the final project proposal? So that would be in spring next year. What I can say is, this is why it's relatively short. We will not, we cannot give you a defined answer for this, because we really make a tailored, project-tailored further development of the projects. So we will support you, but how the support will precisely look like will depend on the project and what you need. And if you are to win the award, we will sit down and make a kind of an implementation plan, how you can actually bring this to life. But this is not something we can discuss here, and this will vary from year to year, and from project to project quite substantially. And I think with that, I thank everybody for their patience. I thank particularly Marion for preparing all the details and giving us this fantastic overview. And I'm looking forward for a huge amount of great applications, and I hope that it will be a hard time for the jury to pick a winner. That's always a good sign.
It was already tough last year, and I think the more people know about this, the tougher it's going to be, but that's exactly what we would like to. So also thank you from my side. If you need any more information, you're welcome to contact me or Benedikt, of course. And there's also all information that we discussed today available on the website of the Einstein Center for Neurosciences. So thank you very much for participating in this webinar. The webinar video is going to be available as a recording on the website of the Einstein Center for Neurosciences as well. Have a great evening, and looking forward to receiving your award submissions.